All right, good morning, everybody. Today we begin Maseches Nedarim, but before we do so, yesterday Charlie had noted the fact that the deer is not the fastest animal, and that he would reach out to Rabbi Slifkin, who is the world's expert on animals and halacha and in Jewish thought generally. And so he has already gotten a response. And so I'm as eager to hear it as I'm sure everyone else is to find out what Rabbi Slifkin had to say. So please, Charlie, share what he had to say.
Sure. So his response was very short, but it was informative. He said, even if they knew about cheetahs, and there were cheaters in Persia, not so sure that they knew about how fast they could run. So my comment is that actually makes some sense because they didn't, while they had accurate clocks for based on sand or water for stationary places to have time, stopwatches would have been another thing, and you don't get a lot of time to clock a cheetah's sprint because they only run at the fast rate for short periods of time. So it is highly possible that they did not realize how fast their sprints are when they are hunting.
Exactly. Oh, interesting. All right.
Whereas animals such as deer and pronghorns, which are even faster, and in fact the second fastest animal, can maintain their top speeds for long periods of time.
Well, even if you were to just share that aspect of it, actually, from a Jewish perspective, we are almost always going to be in favor of running fast for a long period of time.
Right.
Over running fast for a short period of time.
Because we have had to run fast for long periods of time.
Well, I was actually more thinking about it from the perspective that we don't tend to view short moments of tremendous inspiration as important as long moments or the lengthy or full lifetime experiences. That's part of that. Exactly, that we're about the long term and the sustaining of our lives, of our spiritual lives. All right, so now let me share my screen as we get started. I'm gonna hold on. This. I'm gonna put this as and here we go. And now let's close that and let's get open the Nedarim 2 page. And here we go. I'm going to share the screen, and so I have, I think, 4 points of introduction. 4 points of introduction. So let's start with the first one. The first one is the page looks different. I don't know. You take a look at the page and you can see a couple of different things. The first thing is that on the inside of the page where Rashi is located usually, it does not usually say Rashi at the top. Well, you know why it says Rashi at the top? Because it's not clear that it's Rashi. And so they want to say, oh, this is Rashi. Well, a lot of people don't say that that's Rashi. The Beit Yosef refers to this commentary as the Mefarish. And that's what the Art Scroll notes that it will do as well. And so that is change number 1. Now let's take a look at the outside of the page. The Gemara is still in the middle. That's that we got, right? The Gemara is still in the middle, but the outside of the page is not Tosfos. If we take a look at the top, it says that it's the Ran. And indeed, the Ran is going to be our go-to Perish in Maseches Nedarim, and we are going to begin even in our introduction with some of it. And the Ran, as you can tell from its length, has a lot to say, right? Is going to serve as sort of like a combination Rashi and Tosfos. It's going to provide the simple explanation or a textual explanation of much of the text. So just as Rashi does, and it will provide a contextual assessment, just as Tosfos often does. Comparing bringing in other Gemaras and making sure that there's consistency and proving its point, as opposed to just making affirmative statements where Rashi would just tell you what Rashi believes without usually providing support, the Ran is going to provide support. We're going to use the Ran much like Rashi. And so as a result, we're going to skip a little bit as we go through it in today's lesson. So that's that. Is there Tosos? The answer is yes. You can find the Tosos on the outside edge. And so there is still Tosos. We will sometimes deal with them. I don't know that we'll be dealing with them today. I'm sorry that Mark is missing this because I know that he likes it when we quote Rashi, and so I'm sure he would find it interesting that we aren't going to really be quoting Rashi. And then finally, on the inside of the page is Perish Harash. Harash, this is the father of the tour, and often a halachic commentary. And so but here we have him on the page. So that is the difference. And again, as we go through, these are going to be the four main commentaries that we'll take with us as we go through tomorrow. It's a 3-month Masechet. So, so stay tuned. But you'll see, because of the Ran and the Dapim are relatively short. So that may mean that we'll be able to almost always be done in 45 minutes. I certainly hope so. So that's point number one, so that everybody can have a sense of exactly how long these classes will take. So that's point number one that I wanted to say. So, and let's go directly to the first Ran on the page for more of our introduction. So called Kinui Nedarim. So I'm going to not translate that at the moment. We'll get to that. But the key is Neder hu be'echad mishnei inyanim. There are two ideas with the word neder, right? So this is Maseches Nedarim. It's important to note that there are two kinds. So what is the first? Im nidrei hektish. So one is that if you make a neder to say that something should go to the Beit HaMikdash, shehu makdish lebedek habayit, that is to say I'm giving something over for the care of the Beit HaMikdash. So that would be olam mizbeach, or for as a sacrifice. B'inyan zeh einu yachol lahaktish ela mashehu shelo. And for this kind of neder, where one says that I want to make this animal a hektish for the mizbeach, or I want to give this table to the Beit Hamikdash, whatever it is, so that they sell the table and use the profits in order to take care of the Beit Hamikdash. You can only do that with things that belong to you. The isuro kolel kol adam. And then when you do that, when you say that this particular item is hektish, then it applies to everyone, meaning no one can utilize that item. You have the ability to create something that is prohibited to everybody, because now it belongs to the Beit HaMikdash, and you can't use things that belong to the Beit HaMikdash. So that is type neder number one. Neder number two, o nidrei isur, she'asar al atzmo dvarim hamutarim. So the second category is a category where one prohibits something for oneself that would have otherwise been mutter. So I have a delicious peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I say that peanut butter and jelly sandwich is going to be prohibited to me, and so as a result, that peanut butter and jelly sandwich I can no longer eat. So even though essentially I should be able to eat it, and ube'inyan zeh yachol asur afilu nichse chaveiro alav. And for this, even though when it came to hektish, to making things kodesh, I do not have the ability to do something with your possessions. In this area, I have the ability to say, Stan, and I'm not saying this for real, I'm just saying this as an example. Stan, your possessions are like a korban for me, meaning I'm not allowed to benefit from them. Just as I'm not allowed to benefit from a korban, I'm not allowed to benefit from your possessions. If I were to say that and to have an intention to say that, so then that would be a problem, and I would not be able to use your things. V'ein isura shablakol. But when I say it, I don't make the things prohibited to you or to Charlie or to anyone else. They are not prohibited to everyone. Umaseches zu he be'inyan nidrei isur. And our Masechet is mostly going to talk about the second of those two things. So we're not going to be talking about making things kodesh for the Beit HaMikdash. That will be discussed in Seder Kodshim. This Masechet is going to talk about making things prohibited for others. So that's point number 2. And it leads to point number 3, which is, why don't we have this Masechet next to Masechet Shavuos, which is about general oaths? It's not about the holiday of Shavuos, a common misconception. And it's not in connection with the Hektish. It's with Kodesh things. So why is this a Masechet here? Well, the answer is the generally accepted answer, and I think this is based on a Rambam, is that there are, as we saw at the end of, because this is in Seder Nashim about women. So why is it here? And that answer is because there are special rules for Nedarim that relate to women. The 2 special rules are that a father has the right to cancel the neder of a daughter before she turns 12 and a half, and a husband has the right to cancel a neder of his wife. Again, certain circumstances, but we'll get to them at the end of this Masechet. And we saw some of that topic at the end of Masechet Ksuvos, and so as a result, it fits right in with a nice flow from that perspective. So finally, as a point of introduction, the language of a neder will generally be something to the effect of, this object is forbidden to me, okay? But our Mishnah is going to note that sometimes you can use alternative language and still be subject to the prohibition that the neder is intended. So as the Ran puts it in brief, there are I lost my place. There are 3 types of nedarim to prohibit something. Let me see if I could find it. If we take a look, so that we did the very beginning of the Ran. Now we're going to jump down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up from the bottom, in the narrow lines of the Ran, where it says at the end of the line, v'nidrei isur. V'nidrei isur hem be'echad mishlosha drachim. No, James is not on the computer. We'll have to find out where he is. Hopefully everything is okay. We'll check in with him. But okay, but right now, actually, I wanted to tell you, Mark, that in this Masechet where we just began Nedarim, which is all about promises, this Masechet, according to many commentaries, does not have Rashi. So instead of Rashi, we're going to have Ran, but that's just for this Masechet. And the Ran is going to be a little bit longer, but we'll try and do some excerpts to make the point. So v'nidrei isur. So again, picking back up about 7 lines up from the bottom of the narrow lines. V'nidrei isur hem be'echad mishlosha drachim. When you make a neder that is going to prohibit something, there are 3 different types. Ikar haneder. There's the main kind of neder. V'kinui, and then there is what we're going to call a kinui is often used as a nickname. So basically, it's similar language that has a similar meaning and therefore is going to apply the same. And we'll see exactly what that is over the course of the first few days. The yados. And yados, when you have a yad, is also, of course, yad is a hand, but it also means handle. And when you have a handle of something, you are touching part of it, but you're lifting the whole thing. And so a yad in this context, I'm going to be translating it as shorthand. You'll see in the Art Scroll translation, they are going to use it. They're going to call this a partial declaration. I'm just going to use the term shorthand for it. And although they are calling a kinoi equivalent, I'm going to use the term similar because I think the whole point is to say, if you say that it's equivalent, then you've answered the question of whether or not the same rule applies.
Some partial declaration.
Yes, exactly. So that's why I'm telling you the words that I'm going to use that they're going. So those are the three different categories. So all right, the three different categories, and Iker Neder. Well, we're gonna do this. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, very nice. So Iker. So Ikar Haneder Hu Sheyomar Davar Ze Asur Alai. So again, the main language of a neder is saying this object is prohibited to me. And now we're going to skip down to the middle of the third of the wide lines. And v'kinuihu shebemakom korban yomar konam koneach kones. That instead of using the word that this item is going to be like a korban for me, you say that this item is going to be like a konam or a konach or a koneach or a konas for me. So any of those kinds of alternative languages will be, again, it's similar. That's why I'm using the word similar. It's similar language. It sounds the same. And so that kind of language will also cause you to have an oath. And finally, biyadot, if we go down all the way to the third to last line in this, so just 2 lines above b'charamim kicharamim, which is in bold in the middle of the Ran, in the middle of the wide lines. At the end of the 2 lines before it, it says v'yadot nedarim hu shematchil b'miktzas diburo shel neder. When a shorthand is when you begin with the language of a neder, ela she'ena gomer oto, but you don't finish the language. V'oto miktzas hadibor have ki'ilu know their kol hashlemos. And the fact that you began with a little bit, a hint of the language, so that's going to be as if you finished the entire language. Shlemet hadibor. Ka'adam ha'oches kli b'beit yad. It's like somebody who holds a vessel by its handle. Shalo umetaltalo kulo. You carry the whole thing, and that's why umeshum hachi kayel nadara. And therefore, it's going to be considered a valid vow. So that is the overall introduction. And now we're ready to really see the Mishnah inside. So now we're beginning Maseches Nedarim, all about oaths. So the Mishnah is going to identify 4 types of oaths that work when you use similar terms. So let's take a look and see. So kol kinuye nedarim kinedarim. When you use a similar term to a neder, that is going to be equal to having said that you're making a neder. V'charamim k'charamim, and the same thing is true for a cherim. A cherim is an oath to prohibit something by making it the like property of the Beit HaMikdash. So a neder is viewed as an oath that makes something like a sacrifice, and you can't benefit from a sacrifice. A cherim is like when you make something property of the Beit HaMikdash, and it's like the same kind of prohibition. So effectively, they're alternatives that do accomplish almost the same thing. And we will see that the Gemara will highlight that's part of the reason that the order that we're seeing at the moment. Ushvuas kishvuos, and an oath. And we'll see at the end of today the big difference between a shavua, an oath that is referred to as a shvuah, and that's an oath that obligates or constrains the one taking the oath. And then, and we'll see that there's a big difference between a shvuah and a neder, and nizirut. And that, of course, ushvot kishvuot and nizirut kinizirut. So again, even if you use similar language, the oath will take effect. You have a question, Lori?
So we have to leave by remind me what time that we have to leave.
Okay, so 8:30. We'll be done by 8:30. So you don't have anything to worry about. Okay. All right, sounds good. All right, so that's the first half of our Mishnah, is to say that the 4 different kinds of oaths we are going to have, that even if you don't use the exact same language that we are used to, if you use language that is similar, and it'll have to be sufficiently similar, that's going to count. Now we're changing topics, and the Gemara is going to ask, I don't understand. You began by talking about similar language, but we don't know. We haven't even given any examples of what similar language is. We said what similar language is when we looked at that Ran in connection with instead of saying korban, you say konam or kones or koneach. But the point is that we haven't actually told us that in our Mishnah. And now we're going to change to, instead of talking about the similar language, now we're going to change and talk about the shorthand language. So what's the examples of shorthand language? Ha'omer lechavero, if you say to somebody, mudrani mimcha, I am vowed from you. It's like I'm making a neder from you, but you haven't said that anything is prohibited, and so we'll see that that's kind of language number one. Or mifurshani mimcha, or I'm separated from you, or miruchukani mimcha, or I'm distanced from you. If you say any of those three, and then you pair it with shani ochel lecha, of what I can eat from you, or shani to'em lecha, or that what I can taste from you. If you do that, you have, and again, even the end of that doesn't explicitly reference your food, but you have now at the beginning of it a hint, a shorthand, so to speak, of a prohibition, and at the end of it you have a shorthand of a reference to the object that you're trying to prohibit. We are going to combine those two and say asur, the item that we're referencing is prohibited. So if I were to say, I am vowed from you, Stan, in that which I taste of yours, it would mean that I would not be allowed to eat any of your food. And so as a result, that food would become prohibited for me. Now, what if we use the language in the beginning of the vow of menuda anilucha? Menuda means excommunicated in general. It can also mean detached, which of course is probably the original source and how you get to menuda meaning excommunicated. And so Rabbi Akiva hayachochich bazel lahachmir. He was unsure about this and ended up coming out with it being strict, meaning that he would say that it's prohibited. And the word chochech actually could have two potential explanations. One is it comes from, as the noted here, it comes from the word rub, or it could come from a word that we actually saw at the very end of Maseches Ketubot, that we saw chech as in palate. We said that, we said about the wine that it didn't make a difference what palate you had, you were going to love the wine from Israel. And so here it could be that what it's saying is that that he thought that even though he was unsure about what the halacha should be, he thought it was more palatable to be strict in this case. So that is our Mishnah. Very, very short. And of course, now we've got lots of questions. And so the Gemara begins by wondering why we talk about 4 different types of oaths, but when we have a very similar Mishnah in Nazir, it only talks about Nazir. Meaning, why did we need to tell you that there are 4 categories of oath that if you use a similar terminology, the terminology works? Why not? We're talking about Maseches Nedarim here. Just tell me about Nedarim. So the Gemara asks, Kol kinuya Nedarim kinedarim. Maishna Gabi Nazir Delokatani Lahu Lachulu. We didn't learn in Maseches Nedarim about all 4 kinds. Umaishna Gabi Nedarim. In Nazirus, we didn't learn about all 4 kinds. Umaishna Gabi Nedarim Dekatani Lachulu. But here, when it came to talking about Nedarim, we talked about all 4 subjects. So Mishum Neder Ushvua Ksive Gabi Hadadi. Well, the point is that in the Torah, it talks about Neder and Shvuah together. It says, Ish ki yidur neder laHashem, o hishabash Shvuah. So we have those 2 kinds of language, the language of Neder and Shvuah together. So we wanted to mention both Neder and Shvuah. So the Keva and the Tani Tardin, Tani Lakulu. And once we're going to tell you 2 different kinds of oath, we're going to tell you all 4 kinds of oath. So the litnik kinoi shvuas basar nedarim. Well, 1 second. If that's the explanation, why do we do neder and then cherem and then shvua and then nazir? We should do neder and then shvua. Neder and shvua go together. So the answer is something that I hinted at when I gave you the introduction about how similar nedarim are to charamim. So Aidi de Tana nedarim that once we taught a neder that causes an item to be prohibited, tananami charamim the mitzar chetza alay, because both a cherem and a neder are about prohibiting an item to you. So it's about the item. You could, if you prohibit a particular sandwich, it doesn't mean that every peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If I were to make a particular peanut butter and jelly sandwich and say, this peanut butter and jelly sandwich is like a korban for me, or this peanut butter and jelly sandwich is like a money that has been dedicated to hektish for me. Those are, meaning it's prohibited, but it's only this peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Every other peanut butter and jelly sandwich I would be able to eat. So yes, go ahead.
But if you took an oath,
But if I took an oath that if I were to say I'm not going to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that would include all of them. Exactly. And that's the difference. That's the key difference.
people like to eat peanut butter.
I know, I would love it. I would never make that oath. I would never make that oath. I love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So, all right. Okay. And then la apuge shavua de ka'aser nafshi minachetza. Right. So the point is that the reason, and then a shavua is different because in a shavua you prohibit yourself from the article. It's a prohibition. Now you can say, I am not going to eat. You can make a shvua about a particular item, but you can also make a shvua. It's a lot easier to make a shvua about all of a category of items. All right, so that was topic number 1 that the Gemara talks about. And now we're going to start the next topic that the Gemara is going to talk about. We're going to come up with some back and forth and some answers, and then we'll leave ourselves off with a question that will get answered tomorrow. So now the Gemara points out that our Mishnah began by talking about the similar kinds of languages, kosh kinuye nedarim, etc. Right? We said the different kinds of nedarim are like a neder, right? So that if you use, instead of the word korban, you use konen or kones or koneach, we said that those are all considered valid. And we didn't even tell you what those were. We just said that if you use something that's similar, it's going to be valid. Umefarish yados. But then when we tell you an example, the example that we give are the shorthand examples, meaning the last part of our Mishnah didn't tell you about konim, koneach, and kones. It told us about what shorthand was. So ha'omer lechaveru mudar ani mimcha, right? Because we gave an example of saying that if I am vowed from you. So visu, and moreover, so the first point that the Gemara is questioning is we began by talking about categories of similar language, but then when we gave examples of shorthand language. Visu yados inshe, and moreover, there's nobody even mentioned the whole concept of shorthand language. So now we're going to have to explain. So Iri Bahon v'chasuri mechsura b'hachiktani. So really, we should be talking about the shorthand language, and that we're missing some language. And this is how one should read the Mishnah. That after we say kol kinuya nedarim k'nedarim, after we say that everything that's equivalent is that is equivalent language to or similar language to a neder is considered like a neder, v'yados nedarim k'nedarim, and similarly, when you use shorthand language, it's also like a neder. So now we have a problem, because what did we talk about first? We talked about the kinuyim. We talked about using similar language. But what did we give an example of first? We gave an example of the shorthand language. So why are we giving the going out of order. Vilifrosh kinuyim beresha. We should teach about the similar language before we teach about shorthand language. Ahu desalik minei hu mefarish beresha. Right? So the Gemara explains that no, what we just talked about is what we want to explain. So the point is that it's like the structure is ABBA, ABBA, not the musical group, but a chiastic structure. That the point is that we're going to talk. We first mention A, then we mention B, then we're going to tell you the description of B, and then we're going to describe A, and that's what we're talking about. Well, one sec, Kiditnan, and now we're going to give some examples of where we do that. And the first of the examples is very famous because we learn the parak that begins this way, the parak of Mishnayos that begins this way every Friday night. So Pameh Madlikin, Uvama Ein Madlikin, right? We begin, what do we light the candle? What can we use as fuel for our candles? And what can we not? And what's the next words? The next words are Ein Madlikin. We first tell you the things that you can't. So even though we said what can you light with and what can't you light with, we immediately go into what you can't light with. And similarly, when it comes to insulating foods, what can we insulate with and what can we not insulate? And we begin with Ein Tomnin. We say what you can insulate with, and similarly, and when it comes to the divorce, to going out on Shabbos with jewelry, what can a woman go out with and what can she not go out? We say lo teitzeisha. What can she not go out with? So even though we began with the positive, we start the description, we start the examples with the negative. So all three of these are in the ABBA structure, ABBA. So whenever we begin, it doesn't always begin with so now it's asking the question, because 1 second, it isn't actually true that we always use the ABBA structure. Sometimes we use a structure of ABAB. So, right, that we don't always say that once we began a topic, let's describe it. There are relatives who both inherit and pass along, and nochelin v'lo manchilin. And then there are relatives that inherit but don't convey to the person that they would inherit from. And we went through all the different categories. There are four, it's a what's it called, box. And so there are four different categories, and we go through all four of them, and then we give examples in order that we listed them. So and now another situation. Yesh mutaros l'baalei and va'asuros livmehen. There are women who are permitted to their husband but forbidden to marry the yavam. And then again, all different combinations. So mutaros livmehen va'asuros l'baalehen. Ve'elu, all right, and then ve'elu mutaros l'baalei and va'asuros livmehen. Right. So we had four different categories, and again, the Mishnah explains them A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. And another situation, yesh unos shemen ulavona. There are mincha offerings that require both oil and lavona, shemen below lavona. And then there are ones that require oil but not lavona. Ve'elutunos shemen ulavona. And then what do we begin with? We began with the ones that require both, meaning we did it in the order. We did A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. And another situation, yesh tunos hagasha, ve'ein tunos tenufa. There are offerings that require that they be brought near, but don't require waving. Tenufa velo hagasha, waving, but not bringing near. And again, we begin ve'elu tunos hagasha, and we begin with the things that require bringing near. So again, we have an ABCD structure. Yesh, and then a fifth situation. Yesh bechor lanachla ve'ein bechor lachohen, bechor lachohen ve'ein bechor lanachla. Right. So there's a kind of firstborn that when it comes to inheritance, but doesn't apply for the redemption of a Kohen. There's a Bechor that applies for redemption of a Kohen, but doesn't apply to for inheritance. And of course, there's other combinations too. Ve'ezu Bechor lanachla ve'ein Bechor laKohen. And we begin with this first category, again, an ABCD or an ABAB structure. So why is it that that's the case? So Holland Mishum de Avshule. We can give an excuse for those because those aren't A, B, really. Those are multiple items. There are more than two. So Mefarashahu de Pasek. So in that situation, we want to go A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. We don't want to do A, B, C, C, B, A, because that might be too confusing. When you only have two categories, so then you can go A, B, B, A. But when you have more than two categories, it seems to be that the Gemara is saying, we're not going to go that way. So, well, 1 second. There's a situation where we talk about an animal that can go outside on Shabbos. And, how can an animal go out? What can an animal wear when it goes outside on Shabbos, and what can't it wear? Delo avsha. There are only two categories. V'katani yotze gamal. And we talk about a camel going out first, meaning that we use an A-B structure. So our entire proof here that says we use an A-B-B-A structure when it comes to two items. But we use an ABC structure when it comes to three or more items. Well, that doesn't work because here we have a situation where we have two items and we use an AB structure. So we turn to Gimel, the beginning of Gimel Amud Aleph, and we say Ella Lav Dafka. Really, it doesn't. The number of the items doesn't matter, and we don't have a set ordering. Zimnim mefarishu de pasuk l'reisha, zimnim de salaf mefarish b'reisha. There are going to be some times where we'll use a chiastic structure, and there will be some times where we don't use a chiastic structure. So that's answer number one. The e-bias aim, or alternatively, you can say yados id de asyan midrasha mefarish lahom b'reisha. That when it comes to yados, which we haven't yet proven, we haven't given the source for why a shorthand language will work. But when we do so, we're going to use psukim from the Tanakh to prove to us that, in fact, it does work. And so since we're going to use psukim, that is why we chose that order. So now the Gemara is going to ask, V'liftach hadein b'reisha. But fine. But then fine, put yados first, meaning we don't need to use a chiastic structure. We could change it by redefining yados as A instead of B, and then we can use an A-B structure. So we could have said, right, instead of saying kol kinuye nedarim k'nedarim, and then kol yados nedarim k'nedarim, we could have said kol yados nedarim k'nedarim, and then kol kinuye nedarim k'nedarim. So the fact that why is it that we specifically chose to reference kinuyim first, but explain yados first? So we are still stuck with our fundamental question of why our Mishnah chose its particular order. And for the answer to that, you're going to have to stay tuned tomorrow. So the Gemara, like I say at the bottom, the Gemara is still not happy. And so, stay tuned tomorrow's daf. I'll note that Dov will be handling. I will be traveling for the weekend. And so tomorrow, most likely, I'm going to Boston. So most likely tomorrow, Mark and Lori, there will not be in person. It will only be on Zoom. So just so that you know. So stay tuned. Look at your WhatsApp to be sure, but most likely that will be the case.
Tuesday?
I will be back. Well, I will be back on hopefully even on Monday, but I will teach Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday next week. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day, everybody. So Dove will do Tuesday, but it may be only on Zoom. So keep an eye out. All right. Yep. Hold on. We're gonna stop this and then we're gonna pick up.
James?